When did the first plastic surgery take place? Believe it or not, it's in this week's Torah portion. The Torah begins by telling us that Isaac was the son of Abraham. Abraham fathered Isaac, which is redundant. Rashi, the principal commentator of the Torah, explains that when Isaac was born, the cynics claimed that Abraham was not the father. Sarah conceived from Avimelech, the Philistine king. So they mocked the paternity of Abraham. And in order to dispel their argument that Abraham was not the real father, God sculpted the face of Isaac to resemble that of Abraham, to be identical to that of Abraham. Therefore, the Torah says Isaac was the son of Abraham because everyone testified that Abraham fathered Isaac because they were identical in look. This idea of cynicism, of mockery, is something that is not based on logic, because these were arguments that make no sense. Because if they were saying that Abraham was too old to father the child, isn't it a greater miracle that Sarah, a woman at the age of 90, should be the mother of the child? And if God could perform a miracle for Sarah, he could certainly perform a miracle for Abraham. So the cynicism is not based on logic, it's just mockery. But then we find a parallel kind of cynicism, that of Amalek. Amalek is a nation, an evil nation, that confronted the Jewish people when they left Egypt and attacked them. And Amalek knew that they would be defeated, but they wanted to throw in a monkey wrench into the respect and fear that nations had of the Jewish people by attacking them and cooling off the ardor, cooling off the enthusiasm people had for this fledgling Jewish nation. So Amalek also throws in doubts and tries to take away from our excitement, our devotion, and Amalek does, and the Philistines do that as well. What's the difference between the two? The difference between the two lies at which point, at which juncture do we confront this type of cynicism. Sometimes it begins at the very genesis. Jewish people just came out of Egypt. They were slaves. They were a fledgling and a nascent nation. And anyone could just knock them over, even with a ridiculous, irrational argument that Avimelech was the father, not Abraham. Amalek came later, and Amalek continues to come. No matter how sophisticated we are, and as developed as we are, Amalek will always find ways of throwing in doubts and saying, well, why are you so excited about miracles? God can perform miracles. It's no big deal. Don't get excited. Those are the two ends of the continuum. We start off with opposition from the cynics, the Philistines, and we end up with the cynicism of the Amalekites, the more sophisticated form. If you look at the code of Jewish law, known as Orach Chaim, the path of life, it starts off with the words that tell us not to be embarrassed from those who mock us. It addresses the Philistines, the Philistine type of cynicism and mockery, the irrational one. How do you deal with that? You deal with that with just don't pay attention to it. Use your own kosher, holy chutzpah to just reject any type of cynicism. But then at the end of that section of the Code of Jewish Law, it talks about the laws of Purim. And the last words are, a good heart is always celebrating. Purim is the defeat of Amalek, of the nation that tries to sow doubts in us. And we have to know that this attack comes all the time. Every day we can confront this Amalek, and we have to just dispel it. We are living on the cusp of the Messianic age, and we've been promised that this will happen. And then there are always cynics. There is the cynic that comes to us when we're weak, when we just came out of Egypt, and we're not even sophisticated in any way. And then there's the attacks that come that are more sophisticated. Our response to that is just totally reject the arguments with kosher and holy chutzpah.